let's talk a little bit about shipping corals. Most everybody here will not ever have to deal with shipping coral, but believe me when I say it is every bit an art as it is a science. So I have like really specific questions for you,
Yeah.
okay? Because um, I want to compare with like our methodologies because obviously the worst thing is to send coral out and have it not make it.
hmm
And certain corals are going to be more sensitive than others, but overall, um, let's talk about these packing methods. First one, what type of heat pack do you guys like to use, or are
I
you
mean, I've shipped
typically?
corals now for my own house, and it Uniheat, as far as the Uniheat packs, as far as is really
Okay,
good.
so Uniheat is a brand of heat pack.
hmm
They come with four flavors of Uniheat. So it's like there's the 24, the third, no, like
Uh,
basically a 20, 30, 40, 70,
and so, yes, I think it's 72 one, and
72.
they're all done by color. So there's a green one, there's a blue one, as far as, and they all have different lengths of time, of course, is when they, of course, go get hot, and they stay hotter for longer. But it just depends on which one you want to use and the extent of the size of the box as well.
And there's also differences in like the heat profile of them. So, for
Mm.
example, the 20-hour heat pack, it burns much hotter than the longer ones. So, like a 40 or a 72-hour heat pack, I think the operating temperature of that is like 120,
hmm
whereas the 20-hour heat pack I think is like 160.
Yeah.
So like you're more at risk of like cooking a coral early and then having
Yes.
it fall off. So which is your favorite flavor of Uniheat?
It's the 40-hour one. There's the orange one. That
Okay.
one is probably my favorite because, of course, at the same time, when you first hit that heat pack, it reacts to oxygen, it reacts
hmm
to air. So the second it reacts to the oxygen, so if you put it in pure oxygen, for instance, put it in a bag and blast it in there, that heat pack is going to get hot really fast. It's not like chemical
Okay.
reaction, and they always have as far as a peak.
Yeah.
For any kind of heat pack. So some of them will peak up really fast. So depending on how long it extends to, it will change as far as how quickly it peaks. So some of them get really hot where, like you were saying, it will cook the coral because it peaks so fast, it'll peak really high and then taper itself off.
Were you injecting oxygen into your shipping?
I've tried every method you can possibly think of.
Okay.
I've
That's
I've 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 injected as far as heat packs, of course, because sometimes if you was too cold outside and we need to heat right then and there. So you add a little oxygen, give it a little shake, and then all of a sudden your heat pack is warm, like instantly warm. But I don't suggest anyone doing that at all. As far as
yeah,
those
that's
are just the
interesting.
experiment. I wanted to see the effect of air versus the volume of oxygen and
hmm
quantity of far as versus the heat pack on how it would heat. I wanted to try to, when I was testing heat packs out a long time ago, I wanted to make sure that I knew every single thing that a heat pack would do given the circumstances, whether it was given more oxygen or have an oxygen taken away, less
hmm
oxygen in there. Does it heat it up at all? Or even just a little bit. As far as I wanted to see what the graph would
Because there
come out to
really
be.
isn't a lot of oxygen in the atmosphere.
Mm-mm.
And so, like when you're kind of like dealing with just atmospheric oxygen, yeah, the reaction's going to take a little while longer. But yeah, if you're like injecting it, that yeah, I can imagine that could fire things up.
Yeah, I wanted to test different variants and seeing, just as an engineer, as my background, of course, I would like to just experiment, and the more experimentation I can do, the better. Even if it's just something that I may never use, I still want to see how it's going to work.
So, how many heat packs would you put in? Okay, so let's say a box is in the ballpark of like 12 by 12 by 16, something
Okay,
like typical size you might see. That's slightly in the larger side,
yeah,
maybe.
slightly larger side, but
Yeah,
yeah.
12, 12, 16. Let's say. Um, because when you seal up this box,
Mhm.
you have like a finite limit of the oxygen in that box now.
Mhm.
So sometimes people are like, I want you to put an extra heat pack. So it's like, well, you're gonna run out of oxygen. So like the more heat packs is just gonna make you burn through the oxygen faster.
Yes.
So in a box of that size, what do you typically look for? Do you do like one heat pack? And obviously this is very weather dependent. You're
Mhm.
clearly in the winter.
Yeah.
Um, General guidelines. What are you thinking?
Also depends how many corals you have in there. So you have a couple different options, of course, if you're using either using paper or using peanuts, for instance. Of course, there's gonna be a lot more oxygen in between the peanuts as far as in the the packing material than if you have the entire as far as box full of water with corals or just a whole water with fish in there.
Hmm.
So if you could have a massive box, but it's full of corals and there's water all the way to the sides, it's really not going to have a lot of available oxygen in the first place.
Hmm.
So it's not going to be able to produce as much heat. So there are times where you might need as far as to have a little hole in the side of the box to as far as pull in oxygen for itself. Now, of course, you don't want to completely as far as have too much because then it can spike the heat. Or when some people ask, I want to have an extra heat pack in there, well, you can actually cook the corals because they'll be getting too hot inside there. Because when your corals arrive at your home, you would rather have the corals be colder than hotter.
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
I would rather have corals arrive at my house
65 degrees is fine.
every day of the week at
Yeah.
65, 60 degrees compared to having it at what, 82.
82,
Yeah,
bad.
it's only a couple of degrees higher than we keep our tanks, but it just immediately eats up the oxygen. The corals will you'll have corals browned out. There'll be tissue floating around and it'll be completely just destroyed.
A lot of people don't know that, but like corals, heat tolerance definitely trends downwards. Like
Yeah.
cold is way better than overly hot.
And you're also slowing down their metabolic rate. So at the same time, so if there is, of course, the colder they are, they're not going to be, of course, metabolizing as fast. They're not going to be taking up oxygen because corals are animals. They still breathe.
Hmm.
So, of course, when you're, for instance, shipping a large piece, you got to put a little oxygen in there. You can't just throw it in there for as willy-nilly just in the just water by itself. By adding a little bit additional oxygen into a larger colony will help it as far as travel farther a lot longer.
So that's something I've never actually done, and you're not the first person to have suggested that. I'm super curious, like to see like the historical data of that, just because like it is kind of tricky to track that because like I would say that as far as delivery rates go,
Hmm.
like live arrive delivery,
Hmm.
upper 90s, 90%.
Hmm.
So like would the injection of oxygen make that much of a difference on that last few percent? That for us it would be difficult to track.
It's a little bit of both. As far as for a larger piece, for a colony, if you're sending colonies, is usually a lot
Okay,
more people.
we just typically don't do a ton of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So at larger pieces, they definitely helps out tremendously.
Hmm.
But if you're just sending it overnight to a client, to a customer, just in general, just you'd be surprised having a couple extra ounces of water
The water I can absolutely
can
see.
make
Yeah.
a massive mistake. Make use of all the space you have available in the cooler.
Hmm. Yeah, that's one thing that I think that people not so much now, but in the past they would try to like maximize shipping cost by using less water so there's less weight in the box.
Yeah.
And that is not the way to save money shipping.
Yeah.
Like use as much water as you can
Hmm.
and you eat the difference in shipping cost because you cannot save money in shipping with DOAs involved. Like that's the
Exactly.
worst. So like for us, anytime that we're able to use more volume of water, we do. It obviously is better for like the biology of the animal
Hmm.
in the water, but also it acts as like a heat sink. And so it really like normalizes the entire temperature of the box with the heat pack and whatnot.
Yeah. Absolutely. Take advantage of every space you have. I mean, the cooler is a transport device. You want to just take advantage of every little inch you have. I mean, that's going to help out tremendously.
One store that I had talked shop with, they even went as far as sending a bag that had no coral in it with water
Hmm.
to act as a heat sink. And I'm like, interesting. Why not just upsize the bags that your corals are actually in so they would benefit from the additional volume of water
Yeah.
during shipping? But no, but that was one thing that they had talked about. So I was like, okay.
And I've done that.
Yeah,
And there's a reason.
empty bag. Okay.
Empty bag full of water. And there's a
Okay.
reason why I did that. Because, of course, there's also other factors when you're shipping corals. As far as if you have a coral in a bag, for instance, and you have a frag, you want to take advantage of all the water around it. As far as so, if it's in the bag, you also have to want to avoid it bouncing around.
Okay.
So, of course, the bag that, of course, that I would contain this particular coral, like an acrofrag. It was big enough for the coral to far as be secure to the sides, and it can slide up and down as far as the tube itself, and it wouldn't, at a very slow motion because it's in a little cup. and it prevents it from sliding and hitting the walls and bouncing around. Because
Hmm.
UPS, FedEx is gonna, they're not careful. They're not. You can put live fish, live corals, and some that there's any other
Violent
box.
impact is possible.
So just to prevent that in self, so it had plenty of water that I already knew that it would survive the trip without any issues whatsoever.
Hmm.
More than enough. I even added extra. But of course, there was just a little time where you would need a little extra volume of water just to act as a heat sink or prevent it from overheating. Because then you had, as far as a heater, say you had a heat pack that was too hot and you
Hmm.
ran out of ones that were longer distance. So that it prevents the coral from being damaged in the first place.
I think there's ways to package the coral itself so it doesn't have quite the issue of bumping into the sides. Like for example, we float ours,
Yeah.
and obviously you could it can still bonk, could still bonk a little bit,
Yeah.
but you can also upsize the float that it's on so
Yeah.
the float is taking the it's anything is possible
And
if you're willing to take the
oh,
extra
yeah.
time to do a lot of
And
this stuff.
it's also at the same time, one of the reasons is the materials on hand.
Yeah.
Because you can always think of far as what you have, and I'm like, oh, if I had a bigger bag and I had that, I would definitely add more in there. But at the time when I did that, I had this size bag, this amount of water. It's always, you can always think of everything that could possibly happen. But when the time comes, do you have it with you? Do you have it on hand?
Yeah.
So, you have to make use of what you currently have at the moment, especially if a
We don't
coral
have
needs to be,
oxygen.
yeah. If a
So
coral's gonna be
there's
shipped
that.
out on Wednesday, it need to get there Thursday, and you have to worry about a storm coming through that might be delayed till Friday. Of course, you don't have time to run the store, and delivery guys
Oh,
come and pick
sure.
up within the next 30 minutes and it has to be done. Well, you use what you got.
Yeah, and these days we are trying to pack assuming that there is going to be a 24-hour delay.
Yeah,
Like
that's always
all
good.
and we just kind of like I mean, obviously we have a DOA policy and all that fun stuff, but like we live in the real world.
Yeah.
And it's like I know that all of these shipments that are going to go out might
Mhm.
not make it on time, and it's going to be for a goofy reason. So for example, like all of our packages went to, so I think that for UPS currently it's Louisville for air,
Mhm.
and every single one of them successfully goes to their customer destination except for one. And the reason is weather delay. I'm like, no, no, all 19 boxes except for one or whatever it is. And because there's a weather delay, okay, okay. But it's always
Yeah.
something like that. And so we do try to proactively like pack with that in mind. So I think that we use the 30-hour pack.
Mhm.
No, no, no. I think we use 40s.
40.
I
I would
forget.
assume you think you use
Wait,
40s.
yeah, I think we use 40s, and like the 40-hour heat pack burns at a lower temperature,
Hmm.
burns longer. We have a lot more confidence in that. And I don't know how many like holes you tend to punch, but I think that like we get experimental with that too, with how many holes we're putting into the box to
Yeah.
allow for the gas exchange.
Sometimes you don't really need that many holes as far as, and sometimes you don't want holes at all. I mean, I usually prevent putting holes whatsoever in most of my, when I used to ship, most of my boxes, even now, just because they usually aren't that necessary. I rather the heat pack burn itself out and arrive a little cooler than just trying to save a couple extra degrees, and it might arrive at, say, 76, but it arrived at like 72 just because it was a hole. So it
Yeah, because
depends on them.
you are giving up insulating factor of the
Hmm.
packaging
Exactly.
in exchange for like air sort of for the heat pack. And it's not even that there's a lot of oxygen transfer through a little hole,
Yeah.
but it's something. Yeah, like I said, guys, it is largely more art. I mean, obviously it is science, but there's a lot of art
Yeah.
aspects to it. It's literally science,
Yeah.
but it's not something you can just punch into a formula and have it work out.
Yeah. Yeah, just after a while, you start shipping corals and you get experience with it, and you'll start seeing what, as far as works the best for going to certain locations.
The
And
location thing is super tricky. And I know that like when you were because you're down in like Texas, Florida,
Mhm.
where it's a lot more steady as far as temperatures go.
Mhm.
But we're also shipping to places that are not necessary. Like, Ohio has some temperature swings involved, right?
Mhm.
And so it's entirely possible that we here will be experiencing basically freezing temperatures,
Mhm.
and it's going to a location that's 80 degrees.
Yeah.
So clearly, we're going to need to, run heat packs to get it out of here safely,
Yeah.
but not be so effective that it arrives in 80-degree weather, still cooking hot with a heat pack that's over 100 degrees.
Exactly.
And
See,
so you, in that case, want something to die faster, right?
exactly.
It's so challenging to do these, like those tricky things where there's such a big temperature difference in the two
Mhm.
geographies.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
like depending on where you're shipping from and the destination makes a huge difference. Because, like you said, you want it to die at this certain point. So that way, of course, when it gets to, like, if you're shipping from Ohio to Florida, you don't want it to boil your corals when it gets there. It's already 100 degrees and humidity's at 98 degrees, and everybody's melting as it is.
so one thing that I remember we had talked about when it came to just like our general curiosity about what's actually happening when we're shipping. Uh, we both, by the way, independently did this like years ago. Is we put in temperature monitoring probes in
Hmm.
these boxes and then sent them,
Hmm.
and then we just collected that data later.
Hmm.
Um, did you find that helpful? I'm curious to like your thoughts on
I've
what you
I've
got from this.
I've done it as well. I had to record every minute for as long the entire way, and then sent it to all over the country. As far as from the coldest areas, to
Did you actually learn anything actionable from doing that?
yes, yes, and well, as far as I got more consistency temperatures from going from that location. I mean, there's so many experiments that I did with temperature, whether from just putting a bag and a probe in a cooler and letting it bake in the Florida sun,
Mm-hmm.
just letting it sit out there and just seeing what the tolerance of the cooler would, as far as be able to handle with being exposed to the sun. Because a UPS truck, a FedEx truck, it's a big metal box and
Mm-hmm.
it gets hot. It could be cold outside, but inside that box, it's going to be roasting. So I've taken the probes and I was shipping to the coldest places I could possibly think of. Maine, as far as to Minnesota, to here to Ohio, Alaska.
Alaska.
Yeah.
Alaska's really tricky.
And it was, I mean, Alaska, of course. I mean, I knew somebody who would receive corals, and I'd make sure that her little town was, the basically the roads were either blocked or unblocked. I would check because it
Mm-hmm.
would be snowed out. So they would have a little mini plane that would fly over the pass and deliver to her town.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just check on the plane to make sure it was operational. If it was, then corals would go out. As far as if not, then no corals. So it really depends.
When we did the temperature monitoring thing, I think that our conclusion was you can kind of like game as much as you can on like the thickness of the box, size of the box,
Mm.
heat pack and whatnot. But really the most impactful variable is just straight up the outside temperature. Like you just cannot overcome certain amount of just outside physics.
Yeah.
And that got us a lot more, I guess, insight into like you just can't ship. Like you can try to do whatever it is to get these packages out, but the risk of it is it's not something that we can really overcome. There's literally no point in sending it out at that point.
Yeah.
And so for us, we get very uncomfortable shipping out when it's under 20 degrees Fahrenheit.
And that's fair.
Like it's like obviously we would prefer to ship just so that we can kind of like keep things moving, but there's no point in shipping something where we know that the chances of it arriving alive are so
Hmm.
thin. There's no point. It's like we're gonna be refunding all this stuff anyway. Why
Yeah.
are we paying for shipping on top of that at this point? So like no, we're just gonna have to reschedule this entire day because it's just simply too cold.
And a lot of times people are fine with that. If you reach out to anybody,
Hmm.
and a lot of times, of course, if you reach out to someone who's receiving corals and say, listen, of course, it's the survival of the coral that you want. This is something that you've been waiting for a while. This is something you've paid your hard money for. I
Hmm.
mean, if it's below 20, I would do the same thing. I would just call them and say, hey, listen, I'm not going to ship on this day because it's going to be, of course, a headache for you. No one wants to receive dead corals. So let's
Right.
wait until next Tuesday, next Wednesday. And
Hmm.
majority of people are perfectly fine with that. They have no issue going, yeah, I'll wait a few extra days until it warms up because I agree. Usually anything under 20, I mean, you're taking such high risks at that point.
Yeah.
And the price it costs to replace most corals
Hmm.
is more, detrimental to anything than, trying to just waiting a couple days and then shipping it out on a proper,
Yeah,
proper
it's like
temperature.
no matter how much I would like to send this to you, no matter how much you would like to receive it,
Yeah.
Nothing that we're gonna do is gonna get this to you alive, like
Yeah,
realistically,
exactly.
because you're asking a lot from an inch and a quarter of styrofoam.
Yeah.
That you're asking a lot.
And like, yeah, and because some people, yeah, they use inch and a quarter. I've seen people ship out corals with, in just an inch, straight up inch,
An inch
inch
is
and a
good.
half. As far as, I mean,
I've seen a lot of three
yeah.
quarter.
Oh God, yeah, 3/4 even.
I've seen a half inch.
Yeah. I've seen them in this. I've seen them available for sale, but I never actually purchased any used.
I've seen many people actually ship regularly with stuff that thin. I think our
Hmm.
standard right this second is inch and a half actually,
Yeah,
and
man, that's fine.
and even then, it's if it's under 20,
Yeah,
it's a ginormous risk.
inch and a half is a great place. It's a good average as far as when it's cost versus because when you if you ever jump into 2 inches and three, sometimes that's the price is it's almost you know
Double, triple.
yeah you can't
Hmm.
even have a business because you're the shipping is more than anything else.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah, shipping's no joke for real.
yeah, God.
But it is always fun to hear from other people's experiences on it because everybody does it like slightly differently. There's always like some little wrinkle that tends to be kind of like helpful.
Oh yeah, I mean just in shipping in general, when you have a shipping label from UPS or FedEx, which is the two most popular shipping carriers, you know, I even asked the reps so far as a long time ago, where's the route these things go? Can I tell? And they were like, I don't know. And these are like higher up district managers and so forth. So, being the engineer that I am, at first I kind of try to decipher the code on the actual label itself. So I got a good idea where the corals were going, which route it was going to take, which hub it was going to be, what time it landed in the location. Is it going to be in a container or is it going to be in the plane during transit? Is it going to be in the hub? A lot of those things kind of take into effect because you may not need an extra heat pack because the entire time when it's at the central hub, it's going to be inside.
Hmm.
But certain airports, for instance, they'll be if you're getting importing some way back when, as far as I used to hear stories from importers that it would go through Alaska and they wouldn't close their doors, so corals would be half frozen.
Oh
So
my
you would
gosh.
know that there'd be, So it really depends on location wise. Where's the corals going to be? Is it going to be enclosed or is it going to be exposed to the elements? So I kind of figured out when I was shipping corals, I know what time it's going to land at depending what time zone, what location, and I know that the heat pack or cold pack. That's something we didn't talk about so far. Is the
Hmm.
cold packs are very essential, especially if you're shipping to somewhere hot.
Hmm.
Arizona, Texas, Florida, anywhere to the south is going to get super hot in the summer. So you got to make sure it's cooler and
Hmm.
put ice packs appropriately.
Yeah. No, yeah, because people don't think about Ohio as being like a warm weather state.
Hmm.
The summer here is hot.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, absolutely. When it's like 80 something degrees, 90 something degrees, yeah, those ice packs come in real handy.
Oh yeah.
Now, one thing that we had to do when it came to ice packs was we had to be careful to pack them separately because their corners being frozen get
Mm.
sharp and they can
Mm.
puncture your coral bags.
Oh God, yeah. That was one big thing as far as you never let the heat pack or cold pack touch any of the coral bags
Yeah.
whatsoever. I always, as far as make sure they're separated
Hmm.
entirely,
Yeah.
so there was no touching whatsoever. And even of the sharp corners, just having that cold or heat touching the bag with the coral, the water on it, that could
It's too much.
significantly, yeah, just kill that one coral on top. And then of course you arrive and all the corals will be just fine except that one piece. And that one piece because it was touching the heat source or the cold source and
Hmm. It's no
destroy it.
good.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like it is crazy what we're even doing. It's like we have a delicate underwater tropical animal, and we're trying to get it over to some other place in the country in one day
Yep.
where the temperatures could potentially be off by 50 degrees, 100 degrees
Oh
sometimes.
yeah.
Yeah, it's entirely possible.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. You never know.
Wild.
I mean, and the way it travels, of course, it could travel through an area that's 100 degrees and then go right. It could go cold to hot, back to cold again, and vice versa. And you just
Yeah.
depending on the route.
And it's on a plane cargo hold, and it's
Yeah.
going to be freezing cold air no matter what at
Absolutely.
40,000 feet. Yeah, it's so, and then the expectation on the other end is, oh my gosh, this coral arrived dead. We hate you.
Mhm. Oh yeah.
After all
Exactly.
that.
After everything, you've like trade the calculations in, the routes, the
Yeah.
locations, and then all of a sudden, of course, yeah. Yeah. Customer service and keeping everybody first happy
Yeah,
is also
always tricky.
yeah.
Yeah. All right, guys, that does it from here. Thank you so much, David,
Uh-huh.
for coming in and hanging out and talking shop with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hopefully, you guys learned a whole bunch from our little discussions here. We need to make dinner reservations, so we're out of here. Take care, you guys.